What's up, Packer fans? Welcome back to the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. You can follow the podcast at Pack a Day Podcast. Appreciate you joining me. We are in the thick of the NFL Combine. Chris Olave certainly helped his name and created just a little bit of buzz on Thursday. We'll continue the Combine Friday and Saturday and through the weekend. So excited to continue to watch that. But we had some news and notes from Indianapolis. First and foremost, Aaron Nagler reports that the Packers and Jaire Alexander's representatives have met to talk contract extension, which of course makes a ton of sense. Certainly one of those anticipated moves for Green Bay this offseason. Jaire's in the last year of his deal. They can get some financial savings by extending him out. You can't think of any scenario or situation where Green Bay would not want to extend him and make him a long-term Green Bay Packer. So that always seems like one of those that is low-hanging fruit and would ultimately get done. But anytime you're talking about a contract that is likely to make a player, if not the top-rated, your top-paid player at his position, one of the top-paid players at their positions, there's always going to be a few sticking points in that. But hopefully that's a contract that Green Bay and Jaire Alexander can get done sooner rather than later. And then Tony Pauline also reporting that the Packers are working on a deal with Preston Smith and that deal could happen sooner rather than later. And that one to me is slightly more interesting, while also completely expected. So yes, I expect the Preston Smith deal to get done, and Tony Pauline's reporting the same. However, this to me is, again, the first one where it might be a little bit more of an inkling that Aaron Rodgers is coming back, which again, we're all, I think, sort of expecting at this point anyway. To me, all the deals that Green Bay has done so far, and even extending Jaire Alexander if that gets done, all of those would have happened no matter what. Kenny Clark, Aaron Jones, David Bakhtiari, and then an extension for Jaire Alexander, all of those would happen regardless of whether Aaron Rodgers is coming back or not. I could make an argument that if Preston Smith were to get done, that's the first one where I think you either feel pretty good that Rodgers is coming back, or at least it may play a part in the discussion, right? Because if Rodgers isn't back and, maybe you go a little bit more the rebuild direction, maybe move on from Devontae, in that situation, I'm not sure that bringing Preston Smith back on any sort of exorbitant deal makes a ton of sense. Now, Green Bay is going to need somebody across from Rashawn Gary no matter what. And that's not going to be Jonathan Garvin. It's not going to be Tiba Naliai. So they need someone there. And you can certainly make an argument that bringing Preston Smith back makes sense regardless. But I think you can also make an argument that not bringing him back and paying him makes more sense if Aaron Rodgers isn't back. So if that one all of a sudden gets done, that would be the first move that Green Bay made this offseason that would make me go, they seem to maybe be, other than Tom Clements, of course, but they seem to be operating with some assumption that maybe, just maybe, Aaron Rodgers is going to be back this upcoming season, which, again, is the assumption that I am currently making at this time as well. All right, that does it for Packers buzz from the Combine, from Indy, etc. My main topic today is I wanted to take a look back and just see how Brian Gutekunst has fared when it came to the offseason and free agent signings. We got 4 years now of Brian Gutekunst activity. In some seasons, he had a lot of money to spend. In other seasons, he had very minimal money to spend. He's made some major free agent splashes that have worked out well, others that haven't worked well. So let's go sort of year by year and just take a look at Brian Gutekunst and how he has fared so far in free agency in his 4-year offseason 10 years so far. All right, so 2018 didn't go great. This was his first free agency as NFL general manager, and a couple sort of hits, more misses, however, than hits. Brings back Devon House as corner. That did not go well. Devon House's second tenure in Green Bay, you basically wish that it didn't happen. Too much money for a player that didn't really contribute, had some injuries, and ultimately ended up out of the league. Tramon Williams, they also brought back at corner, and that was a pretty nice value free agent signing. And Tramon had another nice stint in Green Bay. Wasn't perfect, spent some time at safety, spent some time at corner, but ultimately I think that was more than a successful deal by bringing him in and having him compete at corner. Again, he played some safety as well. I thought he had a pretty nice second tenure in Green Bay. For the price they paid, pretty decent signing by Gutekunst at that stage. Next up, and these are not in chronological order, but next up is Muhammad Wilkerson, which did not turn out at all, had some injury issues, but never really developed into the player that Green Bay thought he might be able to develop into in Green Bay. So a little bit more of a bust there. And then two tight ends, Jimmy Graham and Mercedes Lewis. And I think you can make a strong argument. Mercedes Lewis ends up probably being the best free agent signing from that class and is the only one that's still currently with the team. We'll see if that ends up staying the case. But Jimmy Graham, a major bust. And there's multiple stories and reports that Green Bay was very interested in Allen Robinson. Allen Robinson chose Chicago over Green Bay. Of course, Green Bay moved on from Jordy Nelson that offseason and ends up signing Jimmy Graham, using a lot of that money. So there was always the Nelson versus Graham. But Jimmy Graham just didn't turn out in Green Bay. Didn't work. And honestly, signing him maybe wasn't that big of a mistake. Keeping him like a year longer than he ever should have been was probably the much bigger mistake. Awful blocker, and just all of his skills like left him, right? He didn't have any run after the catch ability. He didn't have the ability to get up the seam, and his red zone ability completely disappeared. Now, to be fair to Brian Gutekunst and the scouting staff, what they were hoping for is, especially in those later years, is basically what he did in Chicago after he left Green Bay. I don't know why it didn't work in Green Bay. His Seattle stint before Green Bay was not very good either. And then, he actually played pretty decent. Still not a good blocker, right? But at least he performed in the red zone, which I think was one of the big reasons that Green Bay brought him in. Hey, even if you can't be the seam guy, even if you can't make, the guys miss, run after the catch, etc., if you could be a 6'7" monster in the red zone, we can live with the other stuff. But all of that abandoned him as well, and then it came back in Chicago, which is even that much more frustrating because he actually did put up some pretty gaudy red zone and touchdown numbers with the Bears following his stint with Green Bay. But for whatever reason, did not work out, and a disappointing signing from Gutekunst with Jimmy Graham. And again, the bigger issue is keeping him a year too long. And then, like I said, Mercedes Lewis was a really great signing, although it wasn't in 2018. Remember, Mike McCarthy didn't use him at all. Like, he considered retirement, and basically LaFleur and Gutekunst talked him into coming back in 2019, and then he fit much better in Matt LaFleur's system. But he was basically a completely forgotten player under Mike McCarthy. So not a good signing for 2018, but it certainly ended up being a good signing long term for the past 3 seasons for Green Bay. So a fairly nondescript is probably a polite way of putting, but fairly bad free agent class. When you spend that much money on Jimmy Graham, Devon House, Muhammad Wilkerson, those guys don't turn out at all. Tremont was a solid signing, but again, nothing earth-shattering. And then Mercedes has put a nice 3 years together, but not in 2018. All right, let's move on to 2019, which is, of course, the free agent class that everyone remembers very well. Billy Turner, Zadarius Smith, Preston Smith, and Adrian Amos. Really tough to give Brian Gutekunst anything but, I don't know if it's an A+, but a massive swing in the franchise. This free agent class is a massive reason why Green Bay goes to back-to-back NFC Championship games and puts 13-3 seasons, technically 13-4 in the last one, but you get my point. Back-to-back-to-back is because of these free agent signings and the change that they really brought to the culture and just the talent at some of these key positions. Green Bay was really struggling at safety. Adding Adrian Amos to the mix completely solved what was a really barren position before they got him and Savage. Preston and Zadarius Smith completely revitalized the pass rush, and then, of course, getting Rashawn Gary in the draft as well. And then Billy Turner helped solidify the offensive line. I thought they overpaid Turner initially. I haven't been I haven't been the biggest supporter of how Billy Turner has played overall, but man, that contract for a starting caliber offensive lineman who can play left tackle, left guard, right tackle, and has basically done all of that, he's more than paid for himself and could still be on the team this year. We'll see what Green Bay does with that contract. Zadarius Smith is really interesting discussion because his 2019 was insane. Arguably the best defensive season that I've seen in Green Bay. Charles Woodson, Reggie White, certainly in that conversation as well. But Zadarius' 2019 was out of this world insane. 2020 was good, nowhere near 2019, nowhere near as consistent, ran himself out of plays, didn't seem to have the same passion throughout the course of a game, but still found a way to make 2 or 3 plays in almost every game that he played in and was still super impactful. And then, of course, 2021, where he barely plays and due to injury, some weird situations and circumstances that I still don't think we know to this day. He comes back in the last game, gets a sack, but it was a little bit of a gift because the offensive lineman tripped, and didn't really do anything the rest of the game. So a really interesting case study there, but still, I think a really smart and valuable signing for Brian Gutekunst. Adrian Amos, of course, like I just said, solidified that safety position and is more than paid for himself. And then Preston Smith, like another interesting player, has a really amazing start to 2019. Like, people forget, first 10 games of 2019, Preston was better than Zadarius, or at least on the same level, and then fell off the last part of 2019, was bad in 2020, and then really, revitalized and came back in 2021. So we'll see. And as just mentioned, looks like Green Bay is going to possibly extend him and can, kind of keep him on the team moving forward. So that has the ability to still be a signing that pays off. Zadarius is probably gone. I would be shocked if he wasn't. Amos and Turner, Green Bay is going to have to make decisions on. Same thing with Preston, but there's a good chance that Turner, Amos, Preston could all be back if the chips fall the right way. Let's move to 2020. And I should point out here, these are not all unrestricted free agent signings. Some of these are guys that were cut earlier. I'm also not including guys like Rasul Douglas, guys that were picked up mid-season, so on and so forth. So these are just off-season signings, all right, whether they're free agents, street guys, etc., just off-season signings. In 2020, he goes out and gets a couple of those guys that were cut, actually 3 of them, including Christian Kirksey, Devin Funchess, and Rick Wagner. Another interesting class here. Rick Wagner ends up being a really nice signing and had a really nice year for Green Bay in 2020. But then, Green Bay releases him after the season. It sounds like he may retire, although there was never an official announcement on that. Did not play in 2021, but a really nice value signing for Green Bay in 2020 with what Rick Wagner was able to give them. Devin Funchess, of course, opts out in 2020, has some off-season, issues in 2021, and then ends up being released. Doesn't get picked up anywhere, so that doesn't pay off at all. And then Christian Kirksey had an up and down, little bit injury-plagued 2020. I think kind of Green Bay got what they expected there. It was a minimum. It wasn't minimum, but it was like a flyer on a relatively inexpensive inside linebacker that had some experience. Didn't exactly work out. Green Bay moved on, ends up signing with the Texans this past year. Mostly nondescript, but Rick Wagner was a pretty solid signing and certainly helped that 2020 team. And then 2021, not much free agent room, right? They traded for Randall Cobb. They traded for Bojorquez. They got Rasul Douglas in season, but all of those were not off-season signings. Their 2 off-season signings were Devondre Campbell and Dennis Kelly. Of course, Campbell ends up being just an absolute machine, an absolute steal at $2 million per year, for 1 year. Green Bay's going to, I'm sure, do everything in their power to bring him back. What an absolute revelation at inside linebacker. Great job by Gutekunst. Great job by the scouting staff to find him and bring him in. And then Dennis Kelly, they get him as a flyer at the end of, free agency. And same thing, right? More than earned his keep when he had to play towards the end of the season. Struggled with Nick Bosa in the playoff game. Most people struggle with Nick Bosa. It's going to happen. But overall, great end of the season when they needed him. And again, he earned a playoff start, whether it ended up hurting the Packers or not, probably did. But he earned it up until that point because he played so great towards the end of the regular season and was another solid signing for Green Bay. So 2018, not great, right? Graham was a miss, Wilkerson a miss, House a miss, Lewis and Williams were fine. 2019, just massive free agent class, Turner, Smith, Amos, Smith. 2020, mostly nondescript, Kirksey, Funchess, Wagner, didn't really work out. 2021, Campbell and Kelly, really nice job of finding depth and talent without much money to spend. 2022, probably going to have to be more like 2021, not much money to spend, maybe a couple late free agent flyers that you can add to the team that you hope, hit and, play way better than what their contract is given to them. So we'll see what happens. Like I said, they're not going to have the free agent money to go out and sign any major players. Maybe they could get one sort of impact signing if they really do some, interesting work with the cap. But I would expect much more of a, like I said, similar story to last year, 1 year, $2 million sort of deals, couple guys like that, if anything, this free agency period. But again, Brian Gutekunst has shown that, especially towards the end of free agency, right? Mercedes Lewis, Dennis Kelly, Devondre Campbell, some of those are pretty darn impactful free agent signings where they didn't have much money to spend and picked up some guys at the last second. Worked out pretty darn well. All right, that's going to do it for me today. Thank you so much for joining me. I'll be right back here tomorrow with an all-new episode. But as always, and until next time, go Pack Go.